Hi, and welcome to another episode of Journey to a Dream, brought to you by Kawasaki Insurance. I'm Beth, and I've had the real privilege over the past year or so to speak to many people who really have made racing on the Isle of Man their mission. Some of them have achieved that, some of them did it a little while ago, and some of them have yet to do it. You can check out the full list of people that I've spoken to on the Journey to a Dream podcast page. Today's guest is really quite special because he made the decision, as we'll hear, that he wanted to race on the Isle of Man at a very, very young age. It didn't all go his way, but his absolute determination and persistence really did pay off. And as we hear, he's been through an awful lot, but is still very heavily involved in racing over here. Let's meet him now.
I'm John McBride. I'm chairman of the Manx Motorcycle Club. I began my interest in motorcycling when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I've been involved with the Manx Grand Prix since 1963 as a cub on the scoreboard, and from there I've gone on to become a scoreboard controller and a marshal, scrutineer, competitor, travelling marshal, race controller, and now chairman of the Manx Motorcycle Club. I lived at the top of Well Road Hill, and the parade for the Manx Grand Prix used to go past us every year, and they didn't have streamlining, as they called it then, so it shows you how long ago it was. But the noise and the smell, and of course a lot of competitors garaged around the place, and it was intoxicating, and I really felt then that I've got to do this at some point. I think my earliest recollection of the TT was my grandmother and grandfather used to run a guest house in Fairfield Terrace, and I can remember there being a lot of bikes around. I didn't understand it. Flying up and down Bucks Road, and there were big pennants hanging from all the lampposts, and I knew something was going on, but I didn't really know what, and then all the pieces fell into place eventually. My dad said to me, if you're interested, you want to join the Cubs, and they'll allow you to go onto the scoreboard and you can watch the races from there. And that's exactly what I did. I joined the Cubs. Had a great time in the Cubs, of course, but but the only reason I really joined was to get onto the scoreboards. And I remember that really, really well.
Who were the people you were watching?
My very first recollection of the TT, for example, is I'd seen Chris Vincent riding a sidecar up Backstrand Street, and I ran after him. And he just won the sidecar race. He was bringing his sidecar back to the garage. And I was fascinated because I'd seen his photograph just that moment in Ranscombe's photographic shop window at the bottom of Well Road Hill. And I realised he'd won, and I was absolutely overawed by the whole thing. It really, really had a big effect on me. And I'm standing there next to a TT winner, and I said, "Did you win?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, God." It was an unbelievable feeling. And the next day I said to my mum, "I've got to watch the TT." So she took us all, my brothers and myself, to Quarterbridge. We walked to Quarterbridge from Well Road Hill, and the very first race that I saw was the 50cc TT, which would have been the first one. And anyway, my brothers being younger than me, my mum took them home, but she left me there because I was 9 and old enough. And I watched the following race, which was a junior. And the first rider round was Tom Phillis. And I always remember seeing him from his helmet, a kangaroo on the front. And he was number 1, and he came into interview, and I was blown away by that as well, because he, as far as I was concerned, he was famous because he had his photograph in all sorts of magazines and things like that. And unfortunately, I found out later he was killed. That brought it home to me that racing is dangerous, really. He was killed in that race. Anyway, from then on, I just wanted to be involved. I was too young to go on the scoreboard for the TT the following year, but I was on the scoreboard for the Manx Grand Prix. And that started a continuous Manx Grand Prix career, because I've always been involved with it, one way or the other, from that point on, right up to now. And I suppose you could say it's taken over my life in a way.
Do you know what's incredible? It's just listening to you and how vivid those memories are. It really was like an assault on the senses of you.
Oh, yes, yeah. I mean, I just got a job. My dad got me a job in Costain's the Butchers. G.H. Costain, his nephew, G.R. Costain, had won a Manx Grand Prix, and we used to see him quite regularly. And he was a famous man as far as I was concerned. And because I had some money, I could buy Motorcycle News, and every Wednesday I'd buy Motorcycle News. And you build up your knowledge, and you know exactly what's going on. You go to school, and you know a little bit more than everybody else. And, I think you had to invest a lot of your time in those days and effort in finding things out, whereas today it's right at your fingertips. So I'm not so sure people may get the same thing out, the same feeling out of it as we did in those days, because you really had to make an effort to find things out, and it's stuck in your memory, and that's why my memories of a lot of these things are so good, because you had to make an effort to do it.
And it sounds like your parents really helped you encourage that.
Not really, no. I mean, my dad was never interested in racing. My mum thought it was terrible, and I mean, I couldn't start racing until I was 21, because that was the age of majority. And
so they were okay with you watching it, but they thought of you doing it.
But they didn't want me to race.
Right.
And when I was 21, I started doing motocross, and I wasn't very good at that, but I did it anyway. And eventually, I got to the stage where, I was helping a friend of mine, Adrian Kermode, to do some rallying, and he encouraged me to. There was a bike came up for sale, and he encouraged me to buy it, so I bought it and wondered what I'd done then, because it was a pure racing bike and very, very difficult to ride. But anyway, I went out and I wasn't very good, but I got better. But I did qualify for a national licence in my first year. And anyway, I entered the Manx Grand Prix. I did a few meetings the following year to get myself ready for it. And then I broke my collarbone at a week before the Manx Grand Prix at the Derby Road meeting, and I shouldn't have done it, and I shouldn't have been out there. But I was brought up to the control tower to see the doctor. It was Paddy Reel, and he said, "You just be careful, no shenanigans around this course." And off I went, and I was in pain. I couldn't ride really, but I did. Which is stupid, and you just couldn't do it today. You just wouldn't be allowed to do it. But I did, and I slowly, and I say slowly, got better and better. But I was hooked, and that was it. And you can spend as much as you like on it, but I had other interests as well, so I couldn't afford to spend all my money on racing. So, yeah. And
in terms of putting the bikes together, were you quite hands-on in that regard too?
Well, I did all my own work. I did everything myself. I didn't. The only person who did any work for me was Steve Moynihan, who I think still helps out. But he used to do crankshafts for everybody, because crankshafts and bits and pieces needed regular maintenance on these racing bikes. So he was the crankshaft king, and he did all sorts of other bits and pieces as well. But he was good for a bit of advice on the mechanical side of it. Yeah, but I think I do envy today's newcomers to the Manx Grand Prix and the TT for that matter. I didn't know the course at all from the minute I pushed off down Bray Hill. I didn't really know the course that well. But today's newcomers do get a lot of instruction, and they do get assessed, and they've got a good idea where they're going. There's all sorts of onboard videos and things, which there weren't then. But I had to teach myself, and really that I didn't get much advice from anybody.
So this was the newcomers, 1979, was it?
1979, yes, yeah. So I'd been a scrutineer before that, so I knew a lot of the riders and this sort of thing, but I never even thought to ask advice. I just went about it my own way. And anyway, I got there in the end, I suppose.
And you had a best finish, I think, in the MGP of 10th in the 1987 Senior Manx Grand Prix. It sounds like, John, that it really wasn't all about the results for you, though. It was just something you felt compelled to do and keep doing.
Yes. Well, I was getting better. I could feel myself getting better. I built my own bike from spares, and it was all right. It wasn't too bad. It was reliable. And I was persuaded to buy a decent bike. It was ex-Alan Carter TZ350, and that transformed my riding. I could suddenly feel like I could go places on that. And I got my first Manx Grand Prix replica on that, and I was actually lying fifth in the junior on it when it seized. But a friend of mine, Jeff Martin, had suddenly started racing a production bike, which was the new GSXR 750. And he persuaded me that you don't have to do much maintenance to these things; they just keep on running. So for the following year, I got one, and I'd never raced a four-stroke before, and I found it a bit difficult. and I didn't know how I was going to hang on to it for 6 laps around the TT course for the Manx Grand Prix. I'd done the production TT in June, and it was wobbling everywhere and everything. But I taught myself to get round it. I knew eventually how to manage it, and I didn't get a bad result. I got 16th in that, so that wasn't too bad. Yeah, I mean, things were starting to move up, and in 1987, the results started to come together. And then I started crashing. I went to Czechoslovakia, had a big crash there, and ended up with concussion. And then immediately after the next race, I fell off in the TT and broke my arm and collarbone at Balaf Bridge. And then I had a big accident at Keppel Gate, and all those 3 accidents just knocked me back. And I just thought, well, I've got to pull myself together here. And it knocked my confidence. So I just carried on riding, hoping to get a little bit better. And I was just getting back to the stage where I felt I could probably be competitive again. And Kipper Killip rang me up and asked me if I'd be a travelling marshal. So I thought, well, I'm getting older. I suppose it's probably time to do something like that, because they supply the bike, they supply the fuel, you get a lot of laps in. And I didn't really know too much about being a travelling marshal, but I soon adapted to it, and it's got its upsides and its downsides, but it on the whole, it's a very good experience.
And you are, therefore, still an integral part of allowing racing to go ahead, and I just wonder what that little John of 8 or 9 would have made of seeing himself as a travelling marshal.
He wouldn't have believed it. I mean, we used to go on Sunday school picnics to Glenwillan. And sometimes we used to wander up to Douglas Road Corner and watch the Thursday afternoon practice, and be a travelling marshal there. And I didn't even know what he was. What's that guy with the big M on his back? Standing there with his Triumph and kick-starting it and riding away. I had no idea. But to suddenly join their ranks, I thought it was a great honour, really. It really was, because to be fair, they don't select you because you're the fastest, but they do select you because you can ride reasonably quick, and you can keep a cool head in a crisis. So they must have thought I could keep a cool head in a crisis. So I was quite impressed with them for that, really.
And we've spoken to Jim Hunter and also Jonathan Woodward, who are current travelling marshals in this series so far. And the reality of that job, John, is that you do have to deal with incidents, and you haven't got a clue what you're going to be faced with. And I just wonder, from your point of view, how you did deal with that side of things.
Yeah, it was the very first incident that I attended was a lady passenger fell out of a sidecar at Ballasper. I was at Ballacrane at the time, so I just rode up there about a few hundred yards, and there I was, and she was lying there, and she'd broken her wrists and her ankles. And the first thing I did was kick her ankle. She was, so that woke her up a little bit, but it wasn't a serious accident, luckily, but it turned into a bit of a fiasco, because we couldn't get the helicopter down because there was sea mist, and we had to carry her down to Ballacrane and get her in an ambulance and take her to St John's, where they landed the helicopter in the car park and took her off that way. The thing that came home to me then, she was sitting on the stretcher and she said, "Who's going to look after my kids?" I thought, why didn't you think of that before? And you begin to wonder, how do people rationalise things when they agree to start doing the Manx Grand Prix or the TT, as this was? I do worry a bit about people who ride when they do have young children. But
I guess you, having been there as a racer and always having that desire to do it, there's an understanding there too. Yeah.
I can certainly understand it. There's no two ways about it. I always say that if they could give you adrenaline or injection of adrenaline and throw some Castrol R on the fire, and you can watch a video, you'd probably get the same kick, because it's a drug. It's a drug. There's no doubt about it.
So you had a travelling marshal career of 12 years, and then it was an incident that you were involved in yourself that brought that to an end. What do you remember about that?
Yeah, well, I remember it distinctly. I was Supersport TT, incident free as far as I was concerned, and just riding back over the mountain, going reasonably quickly, and we'd been put on some tyres which were probably, they were a sponsor's tyre, and I hadn't really had much experience of them. And Anyway, I just came into Keppelgate, and on the little right-hander beforehand, the front wheel slipped away, and I thought, oh my gosh, and I managed to get control of it, but I was on the wrong side of the road then. And, of course, I'd missed a gear change, so I changed down quickly and threw it into the left because we were just going far too quick to stop. And I slipped off, and then I hit the bank and I blanked out. And I came round a few minutes later, and I thought, oh, gosh, I couldn't feel my legs, and I thought, oh, my gosh, this is serious. And anyway, I remember them putting me in the helicopter, and I woke up 2 months later in Liverpool. They kept me in a coma, and apparently I'd bisected my aorta, I'd broken my sternum, 7 ribs, punctured both lungs, broken my back, my pelvis, my legs, my hip, my arm in 5 places, that finger, and it was a strange experience. It really was. And the first thing I thought of was, when is the Manx Grand Prix? Am I going to be fit for the Manx Grand Prix? That was the only thing that was going through my mind. And that was, as I say, 2 months later. It was the end of July, I think.
And 15 years later, you are still dealing with the impact of those injuries.
I am, yes, yeah. It's there's not a day goes by when I regret what happened, but there's not much I can do about it. So, and I can remember looking out of the hospital window and thinking, well, this is my life now, and I've just got to get on with it. I can't go back. I wish I could, but I can't. So I've just got to accept the way I am, and I've got to move on and do the best I can. So I kept myself busy doing all sorts. So I was never allowed to work properly again. So it was quite a wrench, that, but I busied myself with all sorts of things, being on committees and non-physical things, really. So, I can't, I'd do it all again if I knew what the outcome would be. I think I'd still have carried on racing, and I still would have been a travelling marshal, even if I knew that was what the outcome was going to be.
That's incredible, John.
Yeah. No, it's, I think anybody would say the same thing. I don't think there's many people who regret ever racing.
You also mentioned the fact you were involved in the race control side of things. Yes. How did that all come about?
Well, at the time I was asked, there was a little bit of controversy with the Manx Grand Prix being changed over to the classic TT and this sort of thing, and I became involved in that, although I wasn't on the Manx Motorcycle Club committee. And so I became a little bit involved in that, and then I was asked to join the committee, and Phil Tolman at the time was the clerk of the course, and they had a vacancy up there, and he asked me if I'd go into race control, which I did. I enjoyed it. So
what were your main responsibilities up there? Because I think it's a side of things that people who love watching don't actually get to see.
Well, so I looked after all the marshals on the mountain by radio. So you have two radio sets, one in each ear. One is they call a control channel. If they want to contact you directly, they should contact you on the control channel. But the other are the sector channels, and there's 4 sectors on the mountain, and they will, if you can listen in and find out what's going on up there. So I tended to scroll between the channels and listen to the chatter, see if there's anything. You get a bit of a forewarning of what's going on, and if there's rabbits running around in the road or something like that, at least you're getting a warning of it, But it's if oil spillages, anything like that, flagging, you basically relay what the marshals are seeing to the clerk of the course and vice versa. So the clerk of the course wants something doing, he'll ask you to deal with it. And it's quite good because sometimes you have to make decisions yourself, and get things moving. With the clerk of the course approval, of course. But it's all very. It runs like a Swiss watch when things are going right. But it's interesting when there's an incident, because everyone is different, and there's so many little things that crop up which might cause a problem.
And a huge responsibility when it comes to making those split decisions, I'm guessing.
It is really. You wouldn't make a serious decision. It would really be something regarding flagging or something like that. You suggest a flag or something like that, and then you tell the clerk of the course what's happened, so they're aware.
Quite a few years ago, you became the chair of the Manx Grand Prix Riders Association. Just remind us what that association is all about, first of all, John.
Yeah, well, that's actually 50 years old this year, and it was founded by a lot of ex-riders, mainly riders from the 50s, and likes of Jack Wood and people like that, to foster fellowship between riders from past and present, really. And they used to organise a lot of social events and bits and pieces like that, which I can remember them organising them in the Douglas Head Hotel here, on the night before a race and things. And don't ask. No, they were quite active in that respect, and various things have happened. I mean, Jim Hunter actually got us involved with the Festival of Derby, and we were quite successful there. We used to have a lunch up there, and our past riders were invited out onto the track and that sort of thing. But that unfortunately has disappeared with the festival as it was. People don't seem to be as willing to get involved in associations as they used to be. I think it's probably social media keeps everybody in touch, doesn't it, these days? So, although we still have a lot of members and we do a newsletter and this sort of thing, we're not as active as we used to be. But we've got our AGM at the Manx Grand Prix as usual this year, and we'll be discussing ways we can move that forward. But yeah, it's interesting, but it's not as busy, I would say, as it used to be.
And it's difficult these days, isn't it, getting people to volunteer their time?
Well, it is really. I mean, I've been chairman for too long, and really nobody wants to be chairman. I think this is the problem. Well, the committee are now thinking, well, God grief, nobody wants to step up. There's a certain amount of responsibility, and there's keeping records and funds and everything in line. The committee have been the same now for years. So I think we need to start encouraging some of the younger riders to get more involved, I think.
And also chair of the Manx Motorcycle Club.
Manx Motorcycle Club, that was 2022. I became chair of that. Yeah, I mean, that was more by accident. There was a few changes to the Manx Grand Prix has been documented with the reduction in the programme and this sort of thing, which caused a few disruptions. But I think I fell into that really rather than anything else. I don't think there was no campaign for me to become chairman or anything like that. It just, I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time, whichever way you look at it, really.
And what's the aim of the club overall? The
aim of the club is to promote the Manx Grand Prix. And the Manx Grand Prix is promoted, as far as the club is concerned, is for the riders. And everything we do is for the riders. Now, the government have always promoted the event, because the event is being staged on public roads with their blessing and some of their finance. But the government take charge of promoting the event to bring people to the island and to make sure they have a good time. Our primary focus has always been to stage a good race meeting. We've always hoped that would bring people over. But obviously people want more these days, don't they? And they want more of an impact for their money and the sort of thing. And they're not always content just to come here and watch riders going around. So consequently, years ago we introduced classic racing, which allows TT riders in, and now we have quite a lot of TT riders coming into the classic races, and some of the TT winners and what have you. At one time it was people like Bob Heath and Bill Swallow and people like that, but now we've got John McGuinness and some of the top riders, Mike Brown and Dean Harrison, etc. They come along and they add to the spectacle, really, and I think it's quite good. But we've got to remember that we fall into the trap of still thinking of those classic races as being classic TT, but it's not. They are Manx Grand Prix races, but the Manx Grand Prix has always been for amateur riders. So we still have the junior and the senior, which is for purely club riders. And they've become more elite, I suppose, because we can only accept 60 entries now. So there are only 60 places available, and we have to be a bit picky about who we choose to ride, and we've got to make sure that they're up to the job. So it's become quite a task to sift through the entries and make sure that we're not omitting somebody who could be a future TT star, really.
But John, the thing, especially we think about this year, the number of newcomers is really good, it would seem, on the surface of it. So there are people who are so keen to do this.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think we had 80 applications this year for newcomers, and we chose 29 out of that, because don't forget we're refusing people who may have raced before, but we may feel that they've reached the limit of their potential, I suppose, and then we have to probably say goodbye to them and bring in some new blood, if you like. So it's a bit sad in some respects. I mean, when I raced, I think there were 105 newcomers in that race, but that gradually wound its way down to about 35 to 40. So over the years, so the race was starting with about 35 starters. So it's got to the stage now where we just integrate them as before into the main races.
It's really tough, again, having that responsibility for making those decisions and really bringing disappointment to some people.
Yeah, it is. It really is. One time you had to, once you got to 40, you couldn't enter the Manx Grand Prix again. A lot of people were disappointed when they got to 40, but it was probably a good thing. But there was a lot more riders around then. I mean, motorcycle sport is very expensive now, and I think it's caused a lot of people to drift away from the sport. Yeah, we don't have the same number of entries. I think we used to get about 500 odd entries for 3 races at one time, and you have to dwindle them down to about there was 130 starters at one time, so you get 330 places on the grid when there were 3 races. So a lot of people available, but there aren't so many people available now who do have the right experience. Yeah, but saying goodbye to some of the people is a bit sad. I mean, some of them are getting up to like in their 70s and this sort of thing, so they're getting a bit probably near the end of their racing career, and it is, you can understand them wanting to carry on doing it, but it's just not fair on the younger people. You know, you've got to give them a chance. 2024
is the 101st year of the MGP. I guess, John, what people really want to know is how secure is its future?
Well, its future, there's no reason why its future shouldn't be secure at all. I mean, I think the Department of Enterprise really see it as a stepping stone to the TT, which it was designed to be. And most of the newcomers or new riders to the TT still come from the Manx Grand Prix. Now, if these people were coming straight into the Manx Grand Prix, you might find that they would sink. But just having that year, maybe 2 years at the Manx Grand Prix helps them to stabilise, gives them a good idea what it's all about, and when they come to the TT, they're on the pace. Whereas they can arrive at the Manx Grand Prix and they're with their peers, and the lap record at the Manx Grand Prix has always been, well, since about 2002, has been hovering around the 122, 123 mark. It's never got any faster because when people get faster, they win, and then they go on to or they move on to the TT. So it seems to be reached that point where we're not. It might look as though things are stagnant. They're not stagnant. People are moving in all the time to that level where they can then move on to the TT. But we hope it's got a long future. I'd like to see another 100 years out of it, but. The biggest threat, I think, is probably insurance, event insurance, and public opinion, really, because we're looking at what is a dangerous sport, and we're trying to make it as safe as we possibly can, but inevitably things can go wrong, and the faster people go, the chances of something happening are increased. So we just have to watch this space as far as that's concerned. But as far as the club's concerned, it's going on forever. We don't have any ulterior sort of plans for finishing the event. We've just done a 5-year strategy for the event and presented that to government, and it seemed to have gone down pretty well. They seem pretty happy with the way we want things to go, and we've just got to make it happen now.
And we've got everything crossed for the weather this year, don't we?
Well, yes. I mean, that was a bit of a... I mean, unfortunately, on the very year that we had a poor weather performance was last year at the Centenary. It was very, very sad that racing was curtailed as it was, but people riding don't see the downside of it. I mean, they might do a couple of laps and get a result and get their replica and they're happy, but the spectators, is the big issue, and a lot of it, the future does depend on us bringing in spectators, and we've got to justify the event to government. And the spectators are the crux of the matter, really. And it's very difficult for us to create an environment where spectators are entertained other than with the racing. So we do rely heavily on Manx National Heritage, etc., for their input on the around the entertainment side of things, and to private individuals staging things. Really, I mean, Andrews Racing Association are holding their Derby Festival, and we've working with the Manx Grand Prix Supporters Club to stage a memory lap for Jack Wood around the course this year. Vintage Motorcycle Club are working towards having their rally again this year. Little things like that create an atmosphere, and the atmosphere is everything.
John, one of the things you said a little while ago was that even knowing what you had been through, you would do it all again. To somebody listening who may be just starting out on their racing career, what would be the best piece of advice you could give them? Don't
rush things. Learn. Make sure you learn. Get as much information, which I didn't, but get as much information as you possibly can, and advice from people who know and people who may have suffered what I've suffered, but do try to listen to people, listen to advice. That's the best thing I could say.
To that little boy who watched the races, who was so overwhelmed by meeting TT winners, to be so integral still to motor racing on the Isle of Man must be something to be really proud of.
Well, I'm proud of it, but it's crept up on me. I didn't realise, it's only when I look back that I realise how much time and effort I've put into the event, how much enjoyment I had out of it. Really, it's a long time, and I still feel like that little boy, to be perfectly honest with you. I really do. And those memories are really, really clear, and I can't believe they're so long ago.
Would you say that you've sacrificed a lot to be where you are today?
I wouldn't say that. No, I don't think I've sacrificed anything. I mean, apart from the injuries, I suppose. But I wouldn't say I've sacrificed anything because it's just been so enjoyable.
Well, John, it's been brilliant talking to you. Thank you so much for coming in, and, as I say, everything crossed for a fantastically successful MGP 2024.
Thank you very much indeed.
John McBride. Just fascinating talking to him. As I said, he is the chair of the Manx Motorcycle Club. We'll put the link to that club on the podcast page. Journey to a Dream is brought to you by Kawasaki Insurance. You can head over to their website, kawasaki-insurance.co.uk, and find out how you can get covered. And if you'd like to speak to me on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. BethSB@manxradio.com is the email address. Or if you know Lee Bartram from the Andrews Racing Association, just give him a shout. He's been absolutely amazing in helping sort out all the guests for these podcasts. So until next time, take care. Bye-bye.